Hi, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm, and we're here today with Catherine Cooke. How are you today, Catherine?
Good.
Good. Today we're going to be reviewing episode 4 of the Book of Boba Fett, The Gathering Storm. And boy, I don't know about you, but I just have a storm of questions about this episode, which was maybe so different from, the previous 3 episodes. What were your overall impressions of episode 4, Catherine?
I think it's solidifying the fact that Boba Fett is a lot smarter in the flashbacks than he is in the present timeline. Because the scene which epitomized the things I don't like about the show is when they're in the kitchen in the palace and he's chasing around the rabbit droid and he grabs it. He's like, "You know who I am? I'm Boba Fett." And he's like, why would the droid know that? And then the droid outfoxes him when it shuts itself off. And Fennec Shand gives him this look like, you finished? And it's like, yeah, that's what I don't get. It's like, I think she's right when she says that his time with the Tuscans has softened him up a bit, because he was pretty ruthless in the new canon comics from the original trilogy timeline. In Clone Wars, he gets hardened after he goes to prison and starts running his own bounty hunting racket. The fact that Vader has to tell him no disintegrations shows that he's into overkill. And now he's just kind of getting outfoxed and outsmarted everywhere he goes. But it was neat to, see them raid the palace to steal Slave One, and the fact that even Fennec Shand didn't believe that the bikers could have killed the Tuscans. She's like, oh, that's really unlikely, which is neat, because even though he kills them, they're still planting the seed that's still not finished yet. Like, they're not the bad guys. So I think it's still him making a run at the Pikes. But it was fun, and I also thought it was surprising that when they have the big meeting with the other crime families, that rather than really forcing their hand to side with him, he just accepts their neutrality. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, you have the Rancor right under there scaring him half to death, but you're not really pushing the envelope. And it's like, you need because a lot of times he likes to remind people that he's Boba Fett. But it's like, I think you really need to remind people, because in the way that, actions speak louder than words. So it was fun. I thought it was a lot better than last week's, much better directed. Kevin Tanstrom was the director this week, so I think it was an improvement. So I hope that we're going to the suspense is going to start kicking in, because we're now over halfway through the series.
Yeah, we are quite a bit along, and just like you, I think there were some things that hit the mark while others didn't. For me, the standout scene in the entire series really was that hangar scene where Fennec Shand, it looks like maybe she killed maybe 8 people. Let's say, I can't say confirmed kills, but it looks like she got, at least maybe if not more 8 people. And boy, she really shined in that, and I enjoyed that scene so much. I mean, we knew it was coming. She had her equipment with her, and she was the only person really who could kind of attack against these guards, and she also saved the day, bringing the wall down so that they could escape. But there were some other things that were not so great, like what you called before. I call it the kitchen caper. And I almost wonder whether there's going to be a Book of Boba Fett cookbook and cooking series, the Book of Boba Fett Master Chef, or an instant shopper or something, like where were they going with this scene? It was it didn't need to be in this episode. And oddly enough, I did like the rat catcher droid, but he got shut down, so I don't know. But you made such a good point with the idea of him being at the table with all these, heavy, big time stakeholders. And he's still kind of indecisive, but yet threatening at the same time. And I'm like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's going to be one way or the other. And I think that their confused look at the table was the same confused look that we had while we were watching the show, as he kind of presented these 2 scenarios that overall didn't really make sense. It should have just been, you're either with me or you're not with me. And I also think that what he kind of left open there was, of course they're going to side with the Pikes. The Pikes are going to threaten them much more than Boba has. In fact, the Pikes have been probably threatening them all along. And they're just so happy to kind of be existing there and just, taking what they can get and staying in their lane. And now they're kind of like being asked not to stay in their lane with the Pikes. And there really isn't any payoff for them As far as I can tell, unless Boba is perhaps, keeping things to himself that we're unaware of. But, I kind of got this episode felt so different compared to the other ones that, it really kind of, was very interesting. And, in regards to his motivation, and I've been talking to you about motivations, what's motivating him. And, of course, they've given us so much of this Tusken background, and the Tusken background has been wonderful. It's great seeing the Tuskens. But I personally didn't believe that that could be his full motivation for doing anything. And we're kind of given this very incredible scenario of Boba telling Fennec that we've been pushed around so much. Now it's a time for us to not be pushed around anymore, not have these people tell us what to do. We're going to take over. We can make more money. It's going to be safer. Who would have known? He wanted to be his own boss, obviously. It's kind of like a career shift because it's still dealing with underworld situations, but now he's the boss. Do you think that Fennec truly believes that this is Boba's motivation? And you had mentioned that you thought she may betray him. Is she in this for the long run?
No, because if he wants to be a crime lord, then he's got to be Boba Fett and be a badass and march, kick ass, take names, and he's not doing that. It's like he says, "Oh, I'm tired." He even tells her that I'm tired of working for idiots who can get me killed. And you know how many jobs I've been on, which wouldn't even have had to be jobs if the people involved just took a step back and thought logically for a bit. And I'm like, okay, so now you're advocating for not even getting bounty hunting jobs, and it's like, okay, if you're going to make a comment like that about how dumb everybody is, then you really need to be a lot smarter about the way you're running things in Mos Espa. For instance, when he went to confront the mayor, and the mayor's immediately deflecting, and he kills the Crimson Assassin, and he's like, "Oh, thank you, we'll give you this bounty." It's like, well, Boba doesn't hit him about the fact that, hey, I'm the daimyo, that means you pay me tribute. That's how things work. He doesn't do that. So when the mayor suggests that you should go talk to the cantina owner, and he does, and Boba notices that she's sweating bullets. He's like, "What are you doing? You're sweating like a Mustafarian, like, right, whatever." So if she's just a cantina owner, then she wouldn't have any reason to be afraid of the twins, but she was. So after Boba greets the twins and they leave, he should have walked right back into that cantina, sat her down at gunpoint, like, okay, what the hell is going on here? Because I think she is going to end up having revealed as being a bigger villainous role, perhaps, in the series. Because she said, "Oh, I'm all innocent," and all that. It's like, really? Sort of like when he finally has the smarts to hire Black Chrysanthemum. It's like, you should have done that when you took him out of the palace. It's like, don't wait till now. And that was a cool scene, by the way, because the Trandoshan whose arms he rips off is the same guy who came to pay Boba Fett tribute by giving him the Wookiee pelt in the first episode. So that was really cool to see that, that they paid that off, because we've never actually got to see a Wookiee do that before. I mean, they filmed that for The Force Awakens, but then it got cut from the final edit. But so it was neat to actually see him do that. But now that Fennec Shand has suggested, oh, we should get some better names, there's better people we could hire. I'm like, yeah, well, you should have done to begin with instead of hiring the Vespa gang. Because when he tells her, "I'm tired of working for idiots," it's like, he kind of had that look on his face when he went into the mod parlor to get Fennec help. Like, they're playing all this techno music and they're all these kind of kids, and he's not really interested in mingling with them. He's like, "Look, here's the money, just do the stuff so I can get the hell out of here." So for a guy who says he wants to be his own boss, he's not as cunning as he was before, like he is in all those flashback scenes. And that's odd, because it's like, well, is it because he wasn't fully healed yet? Because they do make the point in this episode that, "Oh, you're fully healed, sir. You don't need the back to tank anymore." And it was surprising to hear that, because I didn't realize that the whole 5 years in the flashback had passed, because they weren't very clear about how much time had gone by. And it didn't seem like it had been 5 years. But I did like the revelation that it seems like Boba Fett was not there on Tatooine to meet Fennec Shand, as I thought. Because that seemed to be, because the Toro Calican character from the first season says, "Oh, she's here hiding out, but she's rendezvousing with somebody." And it's like, oh, so it's not Boba Fett after all, which makes me think that she still might be running some other shell game with him. So we'll see where that goes.
Yes, clearly Fennec is very cunning. And, I think Boba, I would like to believe that he doesn't believe everything that, she hasn't really given out any information at all, actually. It's, she's kept herself quite a mystery, and rightfully so. She has no reason to disclose anything to Boba, and nor would she disclose to anyone, anything to anyone for that matter. But I think that his level of trust of her is a little concerning, because I think under normal conditions, he wouldn't just trust any other bounty hunter or assassin like that, even if he did save their life, so to speak. Now, what's also kind of interesting is, and you did actually bring this up, but I'm going to kind of shoot back and forth into some different things. When he does find Fennec, and as you mentioned, they were not meeting each other. She's there for some reason, but we still don't know what the reason was. I think it's a combination of her hiding out and maybe taking an additional job while she was there. But clearly, since people were kind of hunting her, she had to make sure that she was sort of like in more she wouldn't be in town. She'd stay in a more rural area, or like out in the desert where it's kind of harder to track her, and only an experienced bounty hunter like the Mandalorian could really find her, and that's what happened. But getting to what I wanted to ask you has to do with the first part. After he does find Fennec, and thank God he did, he brings her into this place to have, these repairs, this modification done. Why do you suppose the modifications that are taking place, let's say in this, I was going to say tattoo parlor. It feels like a tattoo parlor.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
It's a tattooing modification parlor. Why is it that it feels as if the modifications that they are making, except with maybe the exception of Fennec, because hers are internal, don't look like Luke's hand? And it's true that after a while, Luke doesn't have the prosthesis to make it look like skin, but it seems like everybody who's in there has a some sort of prosthesis or whatever it is, modification that is meant to specifically look like a mechanical piece.
I think that might be laziness on the writers, because on the one hand, the tech is very high, very advanced. Like, he's able to go into a ripped open stomach and put in all of these gears and shifts. It's like, okay, so it's clearly not lack of money, and even though they don't seem to have any of the synthetic skin available. So I think that was just, oh, this is our parlor and we just don't have skin for whatever reason. Or maybe that's something that's considered more high end. But it was weird to see that type of place on Tatooine, which looks like a very impoverished place anyway. That's why the same thing I said about the Vespas last week. It's like, okay, they look like something you'd find on Coruscant, but something whose paint jobs would be destroyed just by the dust storms and stuff within a week, But that's a good point you brought up, that Fennec was hiding out also from bounty hunters, because she hasn't really been targeted in the show yet, even though she's been with him for a while. So I wonder if that's because the people initially hunting her knew that she went off world for a little bit to help out, Mando, and then they just haven't gotten to her yet. So I guess there's been a point made by some critics that the series doesn't really have a clear antagonist. And so that's fine if you want it to be a mystery, but I don't feel the mystery is that engaging, because Boba doesn't even seem to be that engaged with it. It's like, oh, the twins send the Hutt to kill you, or send the Black Chrysanthemum to kill you one night. The next one, oh, we're going away, blah, 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 bye-bye. And then, oh, the Pikes are here and they're taking over, and oh, there's the cantina, oh, the mayor's missing. And it's like, this would be good if this was like, say, a Batman story, because it's like a detective story. You get really engaged with the mystery, but they're not doing this in this show. They're just random little plot points, and it's kind of plodding along. So I admit I'm not thrilled with the implication that they might be bringing in Din Djarin when they had the music play at the end, because I'm like, Boba, you're badass enough. We've already seen what you can do with Din Djarin in season 2 of Mandalorian. That was awesome. What I want to see is you being the badass self that you can be, which they've done in some of the flashbacks, but not in the present. And I feel that he's got his armor back. He's got a crew, admittedly not the best one. Now he's got BK with him. He's got Fennec Shand. I'm like, do you really need a ton of extra muscle? Maybe not, unless they pull a fast one on us and have him bring in classic characters like Bosk or Dengar and people like that, which would be a surprise. Because then again, if this is a con, he has to make sure they get paid too. Otherwise, that's not going to work. But yeah, I just feel that overall the plot isn't that, the mystery of who's playing who is not that engaging to be dragging it out this long. So I think next episode really needs to take, because there's only 3 left now.
Yeah. And it is getting down to the wire, isn't it? And I agree with everything you said there, especially the idea that, him trying to, who exactly is the bad guy and who is the good guy in this scenario. Something else that I noticed too, and you did mention this, was that after Boba kind of, it was so direct and obviously said, I am out of the back to tank. I'm fully healed now. And I'm guessing, okay, maybe we won't get any more back to tank flashbacks. But most importantly, Fennec kind of blurts out that comment about, well, what about the scars on the inside? And I thought to myself, okay, what scars is she referring to? Because honestly, we haven't really seen anything that's like so incredibly traumatic, in my opinion, to Boba's personal life. I mean, yes, I understand as a child, he had lost his father in that tragic way. But since that time, I'm not thoroughly convinced that the death of the Tuskens, however tragic it was, would have completely scarred Boba and just completely crushed him as an individual, considering how many people he has seen killed through the years. What do you think about this comment? Are there other scars on the inside that we don't know about?
She could be referring to the fact that, like, when he said he wanted to be his own boss, and she's like, people like us don't really get out of this life. We don't get those type of chances. Because he's clearly really upset when he just says all of that to her at the campfire. Like, he bears all about how upset he is about the way his life has turned out, and I'm really done. And I think maybe that's what she's referring to. Like, oh, you're trying to overcome this. But even then, it'd be nice to have a little bit more of that if we're going to dive into it. But it's been a bit, with the different tones in each episode with the director shifts, it's been a bit schizophrenic with that. And it's odd because, when they planned to have that post-credit scene of him going in and shooting Bib Fortuna and sitting on the throne, they're setting up that expectation that, okay, you're finally going to get what you want to see. And then it's like a total bait and switch here. So I would hope that things are going to pick up steam, because honestly, even though I still think he's trying to avenge the Tuskens, considering that he stuck his neck out pretty far for Din Djarin to help him get the kid back, and picking fights with the Empire and all that, it's still not that engaging. It's like, I really don't care about their little problems with the Major Domo, or the mayor is now missing. It's like, okay, he's missing, and there's these Pikes. It's like, move it along here.
Well, it does feel very small town. It doesn't feel like underworld, quality, high stakes kind of thing that we would be expecting. And, of course, in part of this story, I guess we're kind of getting this motivation, this loyalty and tribe thing. And I think it's very interesting because, for some time, or, I'm not really here to debate as to whether or not Boba is a Mandalorian or not. But I do think it's interesting that he kind of, is trying to build a tribe. And he even says something about having a tribe and how important that is. And I can't help but think about the Mandalorians, because for them, being in a tribe is incredibly important. And even though he kind of isn't saying that he's a Mandalorian and, he has never taken perhaps the oath and everything, he sure is kind of living or behaving in that way. But a peaceful Mandalorian, I guess, like, as we've spoken before, like Satine, and how she believed they shouldn't be fighting anymore, but they need to support one another and all that sort of good stuff. But I think it's very interesting. He offers this to Fennec as a way to kind of keep her, and it's almost like, I don't know whether it's really true. Maybe Boba never really had that support system. But even with a tribe of two, his father and him, he understood what it meant to have that system in place. But he's offering to Fennec, and I had to wonder, since we know so little about Fennec, was that offer of a support system really something that would tempt her to stay with Boba? I mean, do you think that would be something that would pull her in, or do you think that she would need more for her to stick around?
Maybe something more, because she's already paid off her debt to him reasonably. It's not like she has to be there forever. And it's like she joined him because she needed to, at the time, I guess, get away from whoever it was that was chasing her. But now, she's been right at every turn. She's been smarter than him about how they should be handling this. And I don't know how long her patience is going to last on that. For instance, when they reveal inadvertently, without actually saying it, how Black Chrysanthemum got into the palace, when they have a flashback. So we see all these other entrances. They cut through these little bars. I'm like, okay, so you knew that there were these back entrances there, but you didn't have them sealed up or anything, even after the Hutts came to town and basically said they were going to kill you. And you weren't smart enough to even, make sure your fortress was locked down. And it's things like that that's just like, okay, I don't know if Fennec Shand is, that's why I think she's going to have a turn or something, because it's like, how many times is just going to watch him kind of flop on his face and just take it, you know?
Yeah, and so let's talk about, and you make a really good point about that. You know, after a while, she's going to be like, well, "What the hell am I doing here?" Um, let's talk about the Sarlacc pit scene. And you know, of course, they go back to the Sarlacc pit, and Boba kind of like puts the ship so close to it, and I'm like, "Whoa!" You know, like that. It was actually kind of cool looking, and it was scary. You know, the idea, I guess the ship could fall in and get crushed by the Sarlacc. So it was kind of a nice touch. It was kind of like the last showdown, the Slave One versus the Sarlacc pit, And of course, there's that really cool scene where Fennec kind of, takes herself out of her, I guess, harness or seatbelt, and disposes a seismic charge into the Sarlacc pit. And of course, we all know that. Like, I still love the sound effect of that seismic charge. But then what's weird about it is that Boba says something like, "Next time, don't touch my buttons." And I'm thinking to myself, really? Didn't she just save you guys? Um, you know, like, doesn't she have your back here? So I kind of wondered whether or not what she's doing is getting to him. Is he annoyed when she makes decisions that don't correlate with what he wants to do?
Well, it seems to be. That one's pretty clear. And I'm not really sure why he would be annoyed by that, considering that, they took the beak thing from the special edition and actually gave it more of a functional reason when it flies out and just grabs onto the windows, pulling it in. And it is an awkward visual how the ship is just hovering right there. I'm like, how are you going to flip the thing over? You also have to fight gravity. You're sitting there like about to fall in, and you actually see some more of the bodies down there when he's looking. And it's like, you're really going to be upset about this? And then he repels in afterwards because he didn't remember that his armor, that he was still wearing it when he climbed out of the Sarlacc pit. It's like, well, obviously he's like, he knows he didn't take it off, and the Sarlacc obviously didn't take it off. So that is a little odd, and that further goes to show that he's not that sharp.
Yeah, and I think that was an indication that there might be something else wrong with him. And I've kind of speculated about how maybe he was, not in the best health, and his recovery wasn't coming along the way it should, even though he may be physically fine. This comment about other scars that he may have, he might be kind of messed up from all this. Do you believe what Fennec Shand said when she says living with the Tuskens has made Boba soft?
Yeah,
And
so
he
yeah, I
responds
mentioned
with,
earlier, he's definitely softer. He's like, no, I'm smarter. It's like, well, really, you're not. It's like, just because you've come up with the idea that you don't need to be a loner anymore and take orders from other people doesn't automatically make you smarter, because he's certainly not going about it in a smart way.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I also have to wonder about, when they, like you had mentioned, the scene where they're together at the table, and, they have the families there. And it seemed very clear that it seemed like spice was the concentration of what they were selling. And you and I have talked about, spice, whether people can just sell spice, and like, how is it sold? Like, what is the spice market like? And Boba mentions very clearly that the Pikes have slowly absorbed Tatooine as part of the spice trade. Now, I had no idea that Tatooine had anything to do with, the spice trade. Obviously, it's in the Outer Rim. Maybe it's a great location to go and pick up some spice if you need to pick up some. And then I started to wonder about, well, if they stopped trading this spice, and they kind of alluded that Boba disrupted this spice trade with the Pikes who were in the train situation, what kind of effect would it have money-wise on the Pikes? The Pikes have so many places where they sell spice, I mean, throughout the galaxy. Is Tatooine a huge money producer, in your opinion, for spice distribution? And, I mean, would it be something that, if it is such a great place for distribution, the Pikes wouldn't want to do anything that would harm it? So how would the Pikes, knowing that they're going to start this war against Boba Fett, how would the Pikes strike against Boba? I mean, I started to think, would they go ahead and, like, what would they destroy that's important to Boba? What could they possibly do?
Just walk into the palace and shoot him. He's one guy. Done. There's not much of a war to be had there.
Well, I kind of was hoping, and it obviously didn't happen in episode 4, but maybe in episode 5, and I had kind of been speculating with you, and I believe maybe one or two other people about this, that I'd love to see Boba kind of like, although there's nothing to really suggest that this might happen, I'd love to see him go into the sanctuary and be with Garza Fwip, doing whatever he's doing with her. And then the next thing we find out that somebody's kind of like blown up his palace, and thinking that he was there, he's actually with Garza. How do you think the Pikes are going to strike? You think they're going to try and make an assassination attempt again on Boba Fett, which he seems to have eluded? But is there anything else that means something to Boba in this whole scenario that the Pikes could strike against, other than Boba?
Well, especially when they find out that the other families are going to try and be neutral. It's like, wait, if you still want to deal our spice, then you have to be on our side. And if they're not, that's going to piss them off even more. It's like, I guess they could blow up his ship, but again, there's really no reason to even blow up the pilot. Just go in there and shoot him. I mean, there's no war to be had here. And I'm sure the Pikes are pretty well financed, because the Hutts even took off because they were scared of them. So, and Tatooine doesn't seem like a very rich place, but I guess it's impoverished enough, like an inner city or something, that people are still somehow able to afford drugs.
And it is very interesting because, of course, at the end of the episode, we heard the Mando theme, and it was incredibly obvious. We knew he was going to show up from the trailer, but this was like over the top obvious. And I almost am wondering whether or not they're throwing him in there to kind of like, make it all right. Will Mando come in there? Will Din Djarin come in and make this whole thing right? Or will he challenge Boba and say, or at least from what it sounded like, or what may be said, because sometimes in the trailer it's not always an exact representation of what's going on in the context. Like where he questions, he's like, "So you're not a bounty hunter now? Like you're not doing this anymore?" Will Din question what Boba is up to, and do you think he's going to side with him or just walk away?
Probably walk away. There's there's nothing here on Tatooine for him to have. There's no armies, there's no starships, there's no space. Spaceport's kind of crap. There's just poverty. It's nothing really for him to anybody to benefit from.
And I have to agree with you on that. I think that Din would be more attracted to the idea of joining with Bo-Katan at this point and fighting for her cause, because it feels like there would be so much more of a payout there. And, and not for nothing, while we are getting a lot of information about Boba and his experiences, as far as I'm concerned, I still have like a lot of mixed feelings about this because of the editing and the arranging of stuff. But I also feel like what's odd about this is that we're not getting the full story of Boba. So while they are providing us with a lot of information about his time with the Tuskens and all this other stuff, it feels like there is some bit of information missing about Boba. And, this motivation that they've given us, now that we're halfway through the series, I don't think we're going to find out what the motivation was at the end of the series. I mean, that would be very, very uncharacteristic of a show. But do you think it is possible for them to present us with an additional bit of information, like what we got here, where he says, "I don't want to be pushed around by these bosses anymore, and I can make more money if I do the work myself"? Do you think we're going to be given any other bits of information like that could possibly justify what he's doing and support his motivations at this point?
No, because he's already made it clear what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of past the point of everybody sitting around and talking about it. And if Din Djarin shows up, he's just there for some action. I don't think he'd want to go with Bo-Katan. She's a bit of a loose cannon. And he didn't really seem too enthralled with her or her cause to begin with. And it's like, you could tell he really doesn't want the Darksaber, but I don't know if they're going to address that in this show. He might still have it, but I don't know if he's going to be using it.
What I imagine might happen with Din is that he'll have this Darksaber and somehow reunite himself with the Armorer. And when the Armorer finds out that he has his Darksaber, I think her reaction might be something that we don't expect. Since it seems like what Din has continually been doing when he associated himself with the Enclave is to bring whatever he gets back to the Enclave. And there is a possibility that he may do that if he can find where the Armorer may be, or if there is a new Enclave, since Baby Yoda is off with, or Grogu is off with Luke now, he might find himself back with that, with his Enclave members again. Now, unfortunately, it's like a consensus that Boba's inaction and his sort of passivity is something that a lot of people are not that thrilled about. And you, Catherine, had mentioned that you thought that this series was going to be where he's just now taking a passive stance to things. Do you still think that even though he keeps talking about war can happen at any minute and this means war and, I have plenty of credit so I can buy, whatever I need. Do you think despite his comments that he will rise up and actually become a man at arms when the time is needed?
I don't see how, because he doesn't have any resources. He just has him, the biker gang, and maybe Din Djarin if he shows up. But that's the problem. He keeps saying, like you said, he keeps saying war, but he doesn't have any of those resources for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't have his whole Tusken camps of superior fighters anymore. He doesn't have a ton of tech. All he has is his ship. They walk everywhere they go and walking in the town and stuff. They don't have speeders. They don't have an entourage, really, or not a good one. So, he's just very passive, and I don't know where they're going with this.
Yeah, it is a bit confusing. And, at least that they had committed to something where we felt that that was the case and this is what he's going to be. Like, for example, as I've said before, we've had passive Mandalorians. Like, Satine was the passive Mandalorian, and we saw that in the Clone Wars. And we saw how she, kind of presented herself, and, she didn't wear armor. She walked around and was the leader of the Mandalorians and, held on to that as long as she could, even though her sister was fighting against her with that. And, I have to wonder, how long he's going to be able to do this because, we saw how Satine's situation ended. Do you think that we're going to have a similar scenario with how Satine ended up being killed, let's say by Maul, by a dark force user? Will something similar like this happen with Boba Fett, do you think?
No, that would be the end of, nobody would tolerate that, I don't think, especially for somebody who you just brought back in the last season of Mandalorian and showing filling up all of the mythology of him and paying it off, and then you're just going to have him just die at the end of this. No, that would just be the end of that. That'd be bad. That'd be a fan revolt like you've never seen.
Well, something, I have to entertain the idea because, this is the only other time that we've seen sort of like a pacifist person, kind of similar background, in this not Mandalorian, pseudo Mandalorian sense, take a pacifist stance in this way. And we had spoken about what bounty hunters we were hoping to see that might come in to help Boba. And I know a lot of people are saying Cad Bane, and I'd said Hondo because I kind of liked the craziness of a pirate, because I kind of feel like this particular series is all over the place. And so why not bring in a pirate who's kind of like goes with the flow, and, how things work out is how they work out. And sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down. This series kind of feels a little bit like that. Even with Boba's intentions to keep things going in a certain direction, I have a feeling that the outcome is not going to be what he wants. And for me, it seems pretty clear that the Hutts, the twins, are not done. They made the assassination attempt, and then they came back with the present. They didn't actually promise Boba that they weren't going to interfere anymore. They didn't say, yes, we promise we're going to do hands off. Will the Hutts, let's say, combine their power with the Pikes? I don't know whether that's even true, to push Boba out.
They're going to try. I don't think they're going to succeed. And I don't think Boba's going to wait for permission to kill the Hutts. If they come back and try and push him around again, he's like, yeah, you're done. Because they've already teased that he wants to ride the Rancor. That'd be something to do, because obviously the Hutts don't move very fast. They could ride the Rancor into town and they could just eat the Hutts. That'd be the end of that.
That would be a bit ironic, wouldn't it? Since they brought him the Rancor, and then they end up getting consumed.
Well, that's what other people have been saying, that's probably a plant to make him think that, oh, we're your friends now. It's like, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that would be such an interesting twist if the Rancor ended up being the ones that end up killing the twins, or whoever actually wants to lay claim to this. Now, my final question to you has to do with a lot of people have been comparing the series to the Mandalorian series. And, of course, we can't help but doing something like that. Um, were we spoiled with the Mandalorian series in the level of quality? And, is there any chance you think that the last, few episodes are going to get to the level of excitement that we got in the Mando series?
No, because one of the problems with the Mando series is that they became overly dependent on cameos. And it's like, you don't need that for Boba Fett. He practically is the cameo. He's the guy everybody wants to see. It's like, that's why I'm not excited about them bringing in Din Djarin, especially since we just saw him in season 2. We're going to see him later this year with season 3. And it's like, do we really need to bring him in? It's like, it would make more sense for, again, Boba Fett keeps trying to tell people, oh, I'm Boba Fett. It's like, well, why don't you prove it? You know?
Well,
So
I
I
have to
don't see
agree.
how, I mean, that would be a radical tone shift for the next 3 episodes for it to do that, since they've been kind of humming along so far. Unless there's going to be multiple seasons of the show, we don't know yet.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you on this because I personally liked how while it's true that I can't remember whether it was season 1 that we did, it might have been season 1 that they hinted that Boba Fett was going to be in the Mando series. And then season 2, of course, we saw him in a greater capacity. I would have preferred something like that for Mando in particular. I don't necessarily want to see him in season 1 of the Boba Fett series. I just wanted Boba Fett to be the focus of the series and, kind of get an idea of what had happened to them. And even if we hadn't seen him taking over the underworld in the series and it had just focused on, let's say, his history and all the stuff and the stuff that went down, I would have been satisfied with that. I wouldn't have had to have seen him take over the underworld in season 1. It could have gone to season 2 where he was more in a position to take over the underworld. And then all of a
It's not
sudden,
like there's much of an underworld in Tatooine anyway. It's like, it's just kind of him, and then, the Hutts came to visit from Nalhutta one day, and now the Pikes are coming to visit from Obadiah. Like, if you want to take over the underworld, you got to make some power moves on multiple planets, and we should have been following him around doing that if he really wants to strike fear or get people to respect him and saying, hey, you're tired of being pushed around by these other guys. I'm just gonna waltz in and take them out like he did with Bib Fortuna, and here, follow me instead. But he's not really doing that. Kind of like even when he told the guy who was overselling or overcharging for the price of water, he's like, oh, 13, you don't sell water here again if you want to do that. It's like, well, he didn't really threaten to do anything. He just kind of told him that, and then we haven't seen him since then. So it's like, is he really that intimidating though on this planet for the water salesman to be? It's like, really, you're going to be more afraid of these Vespa kids and this passive Boba than just continuing running your con? And yeah,
and I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not. It feels like this show is something that they weren't planning on doing. That it's, remember when they did the Investor Day, Disney Plus Investor Day back in December 2020, and they announced all these shows. And I think it's them overreacting to the success and the positive response of The Mandalorian. That, we need to give every character in this thing a spinoff. It's like, no, you don't. And like, interestingly enough, the news just broke the last couple of days that Lucasfilm lost the rights to develop, the Children of Blood and Bone, because they just let it languish because they're too focused on Star Wars, and that now they've decided a new philosophy. We're just going to focus on things under our own umbrella instead of doing original content. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but again, we saw how ridiculous it was when they announced like 15 shows, and a couple of them we know aren't even happening now. So it feels like this is just one of those reactionary things that they came up with. Oh, fans are going to love to see this. And because Favreau's more of a storyteller, he's trying to put more of a story in there, but it's not really jiving as well as it could. And I think it would flow better if you had one director. That's why I'm kind of excited for the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, because they actually had Deborah Chow write and direct all the episodes. So you're going to have a tonal consistency, which I'm assuming that's going to feel more like a mini series. Because like with Mandalorian, it's fine you have multiple directors because they're very episodic, like each episode. But like Book of Boba Fett doesn't feel episodic. It feels more like it's just like they filmed the show and then they arbitrarily cut it up into 7 parts. And I feel that Obi-Wan Kenobi is probably going to be the same, but Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to have the benefit of having one tone, one director, one voice. Whereas this feels like, yes, you have Favreau's voice as writer, but with the directors, it's just.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And as I said before, the editing and arranging of the series is very confusing. And, especially since it's set on the same location, more or less. And the tone of it, doesn't feel as if, it's that way, even though we're on the same planet this whole time. And also, as far as I'm concerned, they could have waited until the right time to do the Book of Boba Fett. It didn't have to be right now. Go ahead and create a story that if they wanted to include this, fine, but do it the right way. We didn't have to have it released, at this time. We could have waited. Star Wars fans would have waited for
Yeah,
for
and
the
frankly,
series.
the flashback stories have been so much better anyway that you should just had the series be that. Don't do them as flashbacks. Just tell that whole story as your first season of the show. Like, after all, if you're going to call it the Book of Boba Fett, then that's like chapters of a book. It's like, this is part one. We're going to tell this whole 5-year journey that he went on. Because I'm sure there's a lot more meat to that we didn't get to see. And I'm like, that'd be a great story because that was have been the high points of this series. So, like you said, there's no need to really rush and try and do. It feels like they're trying to, like at the end of the day, I think it was Favreau Filoni said that once episode 7 drops, all of it will be revealed, and it'll make so much more sense why they did what they did. And it's like, well, that makes it sound almost like this is like a world building exercise rather than a storytelling exercise. Like you're just filling in a bunch of exposition because it might have relevance to the 3rd season of Mandalorian or whatever the crossover event is going to be that they've been teasing. And it's like, if your story is primarily driven by the world building thing first and story and characters second and third, then that doesn't really work very well.
This is a good point. And, I often think about how different the series would have been if they'd even showed us, 15 or 20 minutes, maybe 10 to 15 minutes in each episode of what his life was as a bounty hunter and how it might have been so unfulfilling for him. We needed to see
that'd be great.
How unfulfilled he was. And how he, in addition to how unfulfilling it was, how much he hated that reputation of being known as a bounty hunter. Like he get pigeonholed into things, or maybe he wanted to do a job and they're like, no, you're just a bounty hunter and, you have a reputation. People aren't going to talk to you to do other types of business because you're a bounty hunter, like kind of like getting into that point of view. But I think, some things that we could have seen, for example, might be him being kind of abused by, the powers that be. Why not show us him being abused by the Pikes, or some of the guys who we've seen in these few episodes? It's kind of like, well, I used to employ you. It was like, oh, really? Yeah. Okay, great. Now I'm your boss. Okay, fine. See ya. Like it was very unfulfilling to get that information because we didn't see the context that it was in. Like it would have been great to have seen him, kind of like be left out in the middle of nowhere or something, and they disabled his slave one, and he had to kind of find a way to get out of this, and they weren't expecting him to make it out. Like an example of that might be when Din Djarin has the episode where he and we talked about this, where he had to rescue or get onto that Republic prison ship. And, he flies in there knowing that he could be double crossed at any time. Wouldn't it be great to see Boba do something like this? Something where, he's given this job and of course it's not what they said it was going to be. And, go ahead and startle us with some of the things that he's done that would just make our jaws drop, but also be like, that's kind of messed up what they did to him, or
it's like, I need to find somebody else to help me out in my posse, but they're in prison. Let's go break them out. But in a much cooler way than what they did in the 6th episode of 1st season of Mandalorian. By having him, because we saw what that was like with a bunch of dumb people trying to not let Din Djarin take the lead. So what if you have a bunch of smart people going with Boba Fett and saying, hey, we're going to do this? Like, that would be really badass. That'd be cool. And you could see, like you're saying, filling in how unfulfilling that is with each chapter of this book. That would be amazing.
Yeah. And also, for something that might have been incredibly important to Boba Fett, let's go ahead and see something that meant something to him, because I still have not found something that I feel that is important to him. Every person has a passion. And I'm just not entirely convinced that we have found what on earth is passionate or important to Boba Fett. So, I think maybe the clue has to do with the Twi'leks. And, he keeps going in there and there's kind of like these peering looks that he gives Garza. He didn't say he didn't know who she was. I have a feeling that they have a past together. And, we keep seeing her, and she's been around. She remembered when Black K was praised, in the fighting ring, and how fantastic he was. And even though this is a very, a thorny topic for him, he seemed to know who she was, and she could kind of, talk him down from the ledge. So, there must be something else that she knows about Boba that hasn't been revealed yet. And I kind of really think they need to reveal it soon, because, she's playing this role that isn't just sort of like, I'm an innkeeper and, I'm tending bar or whatever. It's not. She has a much higher stake now. And supposedly the Twi'leks are no longer, slaves like they were before. They have a much higher level in negotiations when it comes to their role, let's say, in particularly in the underworld. So, why not make, Boba one of the persons who was, he didn't know this, but his actions led to, the enslavement of somebody or something like that. We have to see something that has some kind of relevance and weight to it that would make his actions, from what we've been seeing, have more relevancy, at least for me. But it certainly has been a series that has gone in somewhat of a different direction from what I hoped it would be. And if we have to wait till episode 7, I don't even know. Like, I think it's too bad, Catherine, because of how, people are disappointed in it, and they're like, oh, I'm not going to watch it anymore. And I'm like, what series would you have to tell somebody? Oh, it's a 7 series, 7-episode series, but wait till you watch episode 7. Like, what series? I've never heard of anybody being able to say or having to use that as a justification for, hey, wait till you see episode 7. Like, that doesn't sound right. Did they lose their focus just along the way? And
completely. There's no focus in this series. It's like, okay, we told a little bit of this flashback, and if that doesn't end up being his motivation, then what was the purpose of showing us all that stuff with the Tuscans in the flashback, other than explaining why he had the gaffy stick and wearing that? Like, there's no point in that if that doesn't go anywhere. Even though they did tease that, oh well, those Trandoshans couldn't have done it. It's like Pike, but then with again, you have all the mystery of what's exactly going on, like who's playing who, but it's not an engaging mystery like you get out of any number of your hundreds of Batman comics, and it's like, well, and like you said, we don't really know much about him personally, like how he personally feels about things. I mean, they did have those couple flashbacks in the back to tank where he sees his father fly away on Slave One, and it's like, okay, that suggests that he might have abandonment issues, but we're not seeing him. How is he dealing with that as an adult, and what about that is really bugging him? So it's like we're not really getting into his psyche very much, like we did with Din Djarin very well in his 2 seasons. We're not getting a sense of, like, it's not really believable that he would succeed at taking over the criminal underworld the way he's been behaving and such. And then with Fennec Shand being far more, it's like I'm not really sure where they're going with this. And sure, we've seen shows which can sometimes make sense when you get to the last episode, but you shouldn't be this lost and seem this slapdash and sloppy going into that. So this feels like something that they just, like, they told them, oh well, these characters are popular now, let's just write this, and it's like, oh shit, you gotta, speeding on the typewriter to get it done rather than having a compelling story to tell.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate that it's gone down this route. So let me ask you this: what do you expect to happen in the next episode?
I guess Din Djarin is probably going to show up, and they're going to go just march into the cantina. And as much as I don't want it to happen, I think Din Djarin's the one who's going to be smart enough to say, no, you need to. Garza's the person you need to ask. Like, wait a minute, so the mayor said what? And you let that drop. It's like he's probably going to either do that, or wherever the Pikes exactly are holed up, like barge in there and, hey, we're going to send a message. It'll be something like that. Like, they're going to come in and he's definitely going to send a message, but it's going to be with the help of Din Djarin probably.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm a little disappointed by that. I would have rather Din Djarin just like provided, support in firing or something. When I say firing, I mean like maybe with weapons or something.
Yeah, because they said he's going to probably debut whatever his new starship is, since they blew up the Razor Crest in season 2. So he's got a new ship, and people are like, oh, that'll be cool to see. And I'm like, well, I shouldn't really be hyped about what Din Djarin's got in a Book of Boba Fett series. This is the Boba Fett show, not the Din Djarin show. We've already had 2 seasons of that. We're getting a 3rd season, so let's focus on this guy right now, who we know is more than capable of handling these things by himself.
Would it have made more sense for us to have seen season 3 of The Mandalorian and then the Book of Boba Fett, you think?
Perhaps, depending on whatever the big surprise is at the end of the show. Because if this does prove to be a world building exercise for something going on in season 3, then that would be really unfortunate. Because you're going to sacrifice one of the most popular characters in Star Wars for extra exposition for another show. It's that would be kind of disappointing if that's what it is. But it could be, because unless they say that Din Djarin shows up next week, but then if they say season 3 took place before this, which maybe not, because we're obviously not going to pick up exactly from where season 2 left off, with them all standing on the bridge with the Darksaber. So it'll be interesting to see. I take it he'll still have it. I'm like, they can't skip the scene of whoever's going to get the Darksaber next. Who knows? Maybe when Din shows up, maybe Bo-Katan will be dogging him because, she's got to follow him around because she doesn't want to lose sight of the Darksaber, and she might get it at the end of this season.
Yeah,
that could lead into the conflict for season 3, but that begs the question, why that shouldn't be the storyline in the second half and the final 3 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. That should be in its own thing.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that, and I do kind of find it very confusing. But I think Fennec Shan's background and Garza Fwip's background might play a key role in all this. And, as we've both said, we don't know that much about both of them. But I wouldn't be surprised, since Fennec had been on the planet for a while, that she had something planned. Perhaps she was there to meet Garza, or, make some sort of plan with her. But clearly Garza has, a more important role than what she's saying. And Fennec does have a lot of secrets that we're unaware of. So I'm hoping that we do find more about them on the whole. And I did just want to say thank you for joining me for this review of episode 4, which has been so different from what I was hoping for. And while it did have some highlights to it, we could have done without those kitchen capers, as I said before. But, I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see a Book of Boba Fett cookbook come out of this one. Catherine, any final thoughts on the episode?
Yeah, don't do a General Grievous reference in the kitchen. Just give us the General Grievous show where he's the badass that he was in the 2D Clone Wars. Let's see the Great White Hunter of the Jedi Knights. Why don't we have somebody like pay off some things here? It's like, if we're not going to get that in the Boba Fett show, because we were talking about last week even that the fact that Tamura Morrison has been trying to advocate for his character to have less dialogue, and then has to wait for Favreau to leave the set to push even harder. It's like, that's, again, not great that you're having that type of friction, and it suggests that Tim may know the character better than Favreau does. Because Boba Fett doesn't, he is a man of few words. It's not just that he had limited screen time, and that's why he only had 4 lines in the original trilogy. It's that he doesn't really need to say much. It's like, you see, the costume does it for you, which is why I figure if you really want to be intimidating, it looks a lot better for him to walk into that cantina with his helmet on, or sitting or at least initially when he's hosting the meeting, sitting down there with a helmet. So look how scary this guy is before he takes it off. But he feels almost like old granddad Fett kind of thing so far. So yeah, they got to kick it up several notches for the last 3.
One other thing I did want to mention, and something that I would have liked to have seen, is that we are very aware that Jango trained Boba, while he, when Jango was alive, and showed Boba how to do certain things. And it would have been nice to have seen a little bit more of that, a little bit more of the relationship between Jango and Boba that was positive, like, even if it meant that they were blowing up stuff or whatever it was, it would be nice for Jango to say, I've put this in a book for you, everything that you need to know in your life, the book that he provided for Boba, everything that you need to know is in this book. Like, that would have been like such a cool, comment for him to kind of, know about, and to see Boba actually kind of like going through the book, this elusive book that has all of this information and guidance, and for him to have flashbacks about his father that were positive ones. Would have been nice to see that, because Django was pretty amazing too, his story and that whole thing. So I think it would have been nice to have seen some memories rather than us having to see, over and over again, which I understand, but over and over again of, when his father was killed. And I'm like, give us some memories of him with his dad that means something positive to him too, and why it was so devastating, obviously, without necessarily having to say it's devastating to see your parent killed in front of you. Give us some touching moments too. And I kind of want to see a little bit more of Boba that way as well. I don't want to believe that even though he, has had some horrible events in his life, there has to be some events that are joyful in a somewhat more intimate relationship, other than a tribal version that we saw with the Tusken Raiders, which was nice. But for me, it wasn't as satisfying as it could have been, mainly because of the way that it was organized in the show. So thank you for joining me, Catherine, with this review. Catherine, where can people find you?
Every second and fourth Sunday in the month on the Virtual Cantina Network, hosting the Unifying Force at 8 a.m. Pacific. Every Wednesday night on the Phantasmagorium Show at 6 p.m. Pacific, hosting Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns.
Excellent. And as you guys know, you can always find me here on Positive Fandom here on YouTube. Also on Twitch, it's one word, Positive Fandom. But you can also find me on Monday nights with Rainier Creole on Toxic Femmes. And on Thursday nights, you can find me on the 1/6 Scale Man Network on Uncivilized Scoundrels. On Fridays during the daytime, you can find me on Midnight's Edge in the morning at 12 p.m. Eastern. And I believe the time is going to change for the Ver Network show. It's still going to be called Midnight something, but tune into the Ver Network for updates on the new time of the show. And you can always find me there on the Ver Network. And thank you so much for tuning in to watch this review of the Book of Boba Fett episode 4. We're going to be back to review episode 5 next week. If you enjoyed it, please come back and watch our reviews again. Thank you so much for tuning in. And for all of you out there, please remember to always be kind.